In this video, I'm going to be explaining every single pitch type that you commonly see while watching baseball on TV. Now, at first, I'm going to be going through a scientific phenomenon called the Magnus effect, which is an aerodynamic phenomenon that explains a lot of how certain pitch types move. But if you already know about the Magnus effect, you're welcome to skip ahead to four-seam fastball. Now, in simple terms, the Magnus effect is basically when you have a spinning object, in this case, a baseball, and it's flying through the air with spin. There's going to be asymmetric airflow on the two sides. And depending on how the ball is spinning, in what direction, known as spin direction, that's going to dictate in what direction the ball moves. So if the ball's flying this way, with spin like this, the ball's going to want to move up. And that's a fastball, typically. And if it's moving this way, while spinning down, it's going to want to move down. And that's usually a curveball. So the way we interpret the Magnus effect in pitching is by looking at this thing called spin direction. And spin direction is denoted by the clock face, with 12 o'clock pointing up, the clock pointing up being pure backspin, pointing down being pure topspin, with 9 o'clock being left spin and 3 o'clock being right spin. And the videos that I'm playing on the screen right now, they are from the pitcher's perspective. And from the catcher's perspective, they're basically just inverted. Okay, now let's talk about this thing called spin efficiency. So spin efficiency, in simple terms, is basically the percentage of RPMs, revolutions per minute, on the ball that actually contributes towards movement. So, for example, if I throw a fastball with 2,500 RPM with 100% spin efficiency, then all of those RPMs, all 2,500, are going to contribute to that upwards movement. But if I throw with only 50% spin efficiency, then only 1,250 of those RPMs are going to contribute to movement. So in the real world, the way you're going to see that difference is basically the one with the higher spin efficiency is going to move more. It's going to stay up in the air more. While the one with 50% spin efficiency is not going to stay up as much. It's going to drop a little bit. Due to the analytical nature of this video, I'm going to be referencing spin direction and spin efficiency and spin rate, things like that, over and over again. So make sure you understand what I'm talking about. Okay, let's get into it. So most of the pitches thrown in MLB, the most common ones at least, can be grouped into three categories: fastballs, off speeds, and breaking balls. And this is actually something that I referenced in my last video about why hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do in sports. So number one, four-seam fastball. The most common pitch type in all of baseball. Every single person who picks up baseball learns this pitch first. Every kid, even if you're an adult and you learn baseball, this is the first pitch type that you learn. Why? Because the ball flies straight. It's easy to throw, it's easy to command, and you could throw it really hard. You could actually throw it the hardest. So if you throw 5 different pitches, your four-seam fastball is going to be the fastest pitch out of all the pitches that you throw. And for most pitchers, it's the pitch that they rely on the most. And it's a pitch that you need to be really confident with. Almost every single good pitcher has a good fastball. You can't really be a good pitcher without a good fastball. And I'd say that the four-seam fastball is the most important pitch in all of baseball because it is the pitch that you basically base everything off of. So in my video before, I talked about tunneling, and in all of the different combinations, it's always fastball slider, fastball curveball, fastball sinker, right? Why? Because the fastball is straight, it's the fastest, it's the most reliable, so everything's sort of based off of the fastball, right? Your other stuff works because of your fastball. Everything plays off of it. Okay, so here is how you grip it. Why is it called the four seam? Because there's 1, 2, 3, 4 seams when you throw it. And you put your fingers on this seam or this one. It depends on personal preference. And you throw it with backspin, meaning when you throw it, the ball's spinning back. Like that. Like this. This is backspin. Basically what that's going to do, if it's flying towards the screen here, it's going to go up. If you were in an environment where there was no gravity, but there was air, and we were throwing fastballs, we would see that the ball would literally rise. It would literally move up like that. But on Earth, because there is gravity, basically what the fastball does is that it fights gravity and it flies straight. So instead of dropping, it stays up. And for some pitchers, their fastballs are able to fight gravity more effectively. You do this by throwing with a higher arm slot, higher spin direction, higher RPM, better spin efficiency. Their fastball is able to fight gravity more effectively, and it's going to be able to stay up in the zone more. So with a four-seamer, the main way you defeat hitters with it is by overwhelming the hitter with speed. I mean, if you look at Jacob Mizorowski or Mason Miller, they can confidently throw their fastball in the middle of the zone, down the middle, and they know that the hitter would probably still miss it because it's going so fast. You have very little time to react to it. And most of the time when hitters swing and miss, they swing and miss because they're either too late or they're on time, but they swing under the fastball because of that rising effect. So they think that the ball is going to drop because, that's how our brain works. We think that things drop because we live on Earth. That's just sort of ingrained into our brain. But when they see the fastball, they're like, oh, it's going to drop. But the fastball fights gravity so well that it stays up and it misses the bat. So you'll see a lot of this when you watch baseball in slow motion, which is that the hitter swings under the fastball. The second pitch when you're talking about the cutter. The cutter is also a type of fastball. It is a slower four-seamer with glove side break. So for a right-handed pitcher, the cutter would break left and down. And for a lefty, it would break towards the right and down. So essentially what a cutter is, it is an offset four-seam fastball. It is a four-seamer with lower spin efficiency, with around 70% spin efficiency. It obviously depends on the pitcher, but typically I'd say around 70. So here, if I'm throwing the fastball, the axis is like pretty straight. If you're a cutter, you offset the axis and the ball's spinning like this instead. So I've got a pen here. If the axis for the four-seamer looks like this, for the cutter, it looks like this. So not all of its RPMs are contributing to that upwards movement. You might think, well, isn't that a bad thing? Yeah, it could be, but for a good cutter, it is actually a very useful thing that pitchers can utilize very well. For example, Mariano Rivera, his cutter is probably the best cutter ever, and it is one of the best pitches in all of baseball, which is why he was such an effective reliever and such a good pitcher, because he would throw his cutter, and hitters are used to that, straight rising fastball. But then when he throws his cutter, it looks like a fastball right at the hand, and it just slips below the bat, just by a little bit. So when you're throwing a cutter, you don't even need to throw it with a lot of movement. In fact, if you're throwing it with a lot of movement, you're probably throwing it wrong, because what you want to do is to have similar velocity to your fastball. By that I mean, 3-4 miles per hour slower than your fastball, and it moves a little bit. You don't even need the batter to swing and miss it necessarily. You just want it to miss the sweet spot. You want it to miss the barrel. You want the batter to hit the top of the ball even. If not swing and miss, hit the top of the ball so that it's a ground ball. And in that sense, it's very effective. Okay, third, sinker. So the sinker, it can also be called the two-seamer, but I'm just going to refer to them as the same thing. There are actually two types of sinkers. One of them is a true sinker by tilting the axis, and the other one is seam-shifted wake. Now, seam-shifted wake is a very complicated sort of concept. It's a relatively new concept. Pitchers were using seam-shifted wake, decades ago, but I think we recently coined the term. We recently fully understood what it was. And there are probably some things about it that we still don't fully understand, but I think we know enough to know how to use it. Now, let's talk about the true sinker first. So with a true sinker, what you do is you pronate through the ball. So if you don't know, this is supination and this is pronation. Look at my elbow here. This is pronation. This is supination. So for people who are really good at pronating, they're going to be able to throw the sinker really easily because they can easily get on the inside of the ball and sort of tilt that axis lower so that you get a lot of run towards this direction and some of that drop as well. The other type of sinker is the seam-shifted sinker. Now, this is, for me personally, the one that I prefer because I'm actually a really bad pronator. I struggle with doing this effectively, so I go with the seam-shifted variation. And I think it's too hard for me to show with this baseball how it spins because I'll put it on the screen. So essentially, there are more seams on one side than the other side, and that creates asymmetric airflow in a way that's different than the Magnus effect. So the ball gets pulled towards one side instead of just flying straight. The sinker is a tiny bit slower than the fastball, if not the same speed. So if your fastball is around 95 miles per hour, your sinker should be no less than 92 or 93. It is a fastball after all, so it needs that velocity. It's interesting because the sinker is really bad at missing bats. And that's not true for all pitchers, but in general, if you took all the sinkers in MLB and just looked at the stats, the sinker is not a good swing and miss pitch. So you might think to yourself, well, why is it good then? Why do so many pitchers throw it? Well, what the sinker is really good at is by generating ground balls. It does something very similar to the cutter, which is basically slipping under the bat and having the batter hit the top of the ball instead of, the center. So guys with really good sinkers, like Framber Valdez, for example, they're able to generate a lot of ground balls and they get outs that way instead of strikeouts. Now, this is just general strategy and it's not universal advice. If you're a right-handed pitcher and you need a ground ball against a lefty, you throw your cutter. If you need a ground ball against a righty, you throw your sinker. Again, it depends on what kind of batter you're facing and how good your cutter or your sinker is. But, conventional wisdom is conventional wisdom for a reason. Okay, breaking balls. This is the second category. Let's talk about the curveball. The curveball is probably the most famous pitch type, aside from the fastball. Everybody knows what a curveball is. Well, no, not everybody, but everybody's heard of it, right? Even people who don't play baseball. Life threw a curveball at me, stuff like that. The curveball is very exciting because it is huge break. It moves so much. The curveball is typically 15 to 20 miles per hour slower than your fastball. Again, it depends on the pitcher, depends on how you throw it. Jacob Mizorowski's curveball is like 90, but that's an outlier. Not everybody throws their curveball that fast. A curveball is characterized by its sharp downwards movement, and you throw it with topspin, 6 o'clock spin direction, essentially. You throw it with sort of your middle finger on one of these seams. I mean, depends on how you grip it, but the general principle is you supinate heavily on the ball and you pull the front of the ball down with your middle finger, giving it that top spin. So this is the fastball with backspin and this is the curveball with topspin. So it is essentially the polar opposite of a fastball in terms of movement. The fastball stays up. The curveball works with gravity plus the magnetic effect. So that's why it breaks so much. And the curveball is really exciting to see because for a lot of non-baseball fans or even just inexperienced baseball fans, they see off-speed pitches on TV and they can't really recognize them that well. Maybe they're just not that good at recognizing those movement patterns. But the curveball, they absolutely can recognize it. The movement is so obvious and it's so huge that it's really cool to see on TV. You can very clearly see the huge difference it has with that fastball. Fastball stays up, curveball dives down into the dirt, and it generates a lot of really cool swing and misses. Now, like I said, it's the opposite of the fastball in terms of spin, in terms of movement. It's like the polar opposite, pretty much. You're expecting the ball to stay up, and then the ball just dives down and you miss it by a lot. Breaking balls mainly derive their movement from the backness effect, unlike off speeds, where they mainly move due to a lack of spin, but we'll get to that later. I think with breaking balls in general, but curveballs specifically, you're not defeating the hitter by overwhelming them with speed because a curveball is so damn slow. I mean, my fastball is 80 miles per hour and MLB pitchers throw their curveballs at 80. So no MLB hitter is being overwhelmed by the sheer velocity of a curveball because it's really, really slow. Often, you don't really deceive the hitter either because the curveball is so obvious. A lot of the times it pops out of the hand of the pitcher and the hitter's like, okay, yeah, that's a curveball. I could see that. And the speed difference is so big that it's so easy to recognize it out of the hand. So you're not really deceiving the hitter by making them think that a curveball is a fastball. I mean, you could do that sometimes, like if you set up the tunnel really, really well, but most of the time you're not. So how do you defeat the hitter? You defeat the hitter by overwhelming them with the crazy amount of movement that you're able to get from a curveball. I mean, the separation that you can get from a fastball and a curveball is insane. It's the difference is crazy. I think increasingly people are ditching their curveballs when they get to the higher level, particularly because of its very slow velocity and its inability to deceive hitters as well as off-speed pitches. The game of baseball is getting more and more exciting. People are throwing harder. So for a lot of pitchers, they really don't need a 75 mile per hour pitch in their arsenal. It just doesn't work well. But obviously a lot of guys are able to pull it off and make very successful careers off of their curveball. Say Clayton Kershaw, for example, his curveball is insane. Yamamoto, incredible curveball. So there are exceptions. But looking at it from a scientific standpoint, I totally get why people are ditching it once they reach the higher level. For a lot of kids, it's the first pitch, other than the fastball, they learn the curveball because it breaks. It's really fun. It fools hitters when you're a kid and you see this huge break and yeah, it's really fun to play around with. When they get to high school, when they get to college or even MLB, they just realize that their curveball isn't good enough to fool those high-level hitters. Okay, second breaking ball, the slider. Now the slider is actually a family of pitches, but the two main ones that I'm going to talk about are the gyro slider and the sweeper. I'm going to talk about the gyro slider first. So if a fastball has 100% spin efficiency, a slider has 0%, like close to 0% spin efficiency. So if the spin axis for a fastball or a curveball looks like this, for a slider it should look like this. So it's going to spin like a football, basically, like a washing machine, like a bullet as well, like that. Almost all of the RPMs that you impart onto the ball are going to go to waste. They're not going to contribute to movement at all. And you might hear low spin efficiency and you'll say to yourself, gosh, that sounds terrible. Why would you want that? But in reality, the gyro slider is actually a really effective pitch. The great thing about the gyro slider is that, unlike the curveball, you're actually able to throw it pretty hard. For a lot of pitchers, they throw their slider 8 miles per hour slower than their fastball, which is pretty good for a breaking ball. That's a really small difference. So unlike a curveball where it's not easy to disguise it as a fastball, with a slider with a gyro slider you can do that really easily, because for the first half of the flight of the pitch, it looks exactly like a fastball, and then around the halfway point or maybe later, it just falls off the table. The common movement pattern of a slider is that sharp downward movement, and often to the glove side as well. Okay, third breaking ball, the sweeper. Now the sweeper is actually not a new pitch. It's a new name. A sweeper in, the 2000s would have just been called a slider. Like, that's why I said a slider, it's like a big family of pitches. That's why I sort of separated out gyro slider and sweeper. They're both sliders, but the velocity difference is huge, and the movement pattern is also quite different. So we separated it out. That's why there were a lot of guys who threw basically the same pitch in the 2010s. And then a couple of years ago, you started seeing their sliders being marked as sweepers. Nothing changed. We sort of just changed how we categorize it. Because I think at some point we all just realized that, guys, we can't continue calling these two things the same thing, because they're not the same thing. They're not just sliders. I think we need to be more specific. And I think that was a good change that they made. The sweeper is characterized by its sharp glove side movement. And the sweeper is also, like the curveball, it's really, really fun to watch, because like curveball just goes down. The sweeper, it moves like a frisbee. It's really cool. You could use it in a lot of different ways to trick hitters. I mean, you could throw it essentially at a right-handed hitter, and it looks like it's going to hit him, and it's going to break back in for a strike, and it's the most hilarious thing ever. Or you could throw it on the outside corner, and they think it's going to be a strike, and they swing, and the ball moves out, and they look like an idiot, or they get sorted. It's so fun. If you throw a good sweeper, it's so fun. What you want to do with a sweeper is you want to get on the side of the ball. Again, you want to supinate, get on the side of the ball, and impart that side spin so that the ball is spinning like this. Now the sweeper, it's going to have low spin efficiency, but not quite as low as a slider. Come to think of it, the one key thing that separates a sweeper from a traditional gyro slider is probably the spin efficiency, to be honest. I mean, the gyro slider has practically close to 0 spin efficiency, while the sweeper, you want a lot more. You want like 60 or 70% spin efficiency. Okay, now let's talk about off speeds. So with off speeds, they're great, they're amazing, because they deceive hitters really, really well. They play really well off of the fastball because the speed difference is not huge. So take Yamamoto, for example. Yamamoto's fastball can go up to like 97, and his splitter is like 91 or 92, which is sometimes even up to 93. That tiny, 4 miles per hour speed difference, you can't even tell. With a splitter, there's really no obvious sign out of the hand that it's a splitter. So if you're able to disguise it as a fastball for as long as possible, it is so effective. I think along with a slider, these are probably the two best pitches in terms of just statistically how well they perform. Whiff rate, for example, hitters swing and miss at sliders and splitters a lot because you're able to disguise it as the fastball for so long, and they're thrown really hard as well. Now, a splitter is characterized by its sharp downward movement plus a lot of arm side break. Like I said, with all off-speed pitches, they mainly derive their movement from a lack of spin. And this is actually reflected by the grip itself. And this is iconic, and you'll see it. This is the grip for the splitter. Why is it called the splitter? Because you split your fingers. It's actually called the split finger fastball because you throw it like a fastball, sort of. You don't really manipulate your wrist. You don't really try to supinate or pronate it. You throw it like a fastball. You keep your wrist stiff, but you split your fingers. What does this do? Why are people jamming the ball deep in between their fingers and splitting it like this? Well, what this does is, you see how many points of contact my hand has with the ball? With a fastball, you see it's really just, these two fingers. It's my fingertips and my thumb and my ring finger for support. Well, with this splitter, the entire finger is touching the ball, and what this does is that it spreads out the friction and it kills spin rate. If you want more spin rate, you want less points of contact, and it just rolls off your finger. But with the splitter, the ball doesn't roll out of your fingers as easily. There are many ways of gripping this. Some people grip it like this. Some people grip it, they don't split their fingers as much. Some of the people, they do. And the way you grip the ball, that also depends on each individual pitcher. However, the general principle is that you split your fingers, you jam the ball deep in between your fingers to kill spin rate. Interestingly, the splitter is more popular in Japan and was popular back then in the US, and then it sort of died out. Pitchers stopped throwing it. But it was always very popular in Japan. And a lot of pitchers from Japan, when they came over to the US, they sort of brought it over, and American guys saw that these guys are doing well with this pitch, and they started learning it. And over the last 2 or 3 years, you're seeing a lot more splitters than, 10 years ago. It's actually interesting why the splitter is so effective in Japan, because in Japan, the hitters actually swing their bat flatter instead of elevating the bat up like Aaron Judge would do or Ohtani would do. So with that sort of flat swing, the splitter is devastating. Second off-speed pitch, the changeup. The changeup, interestingly, is basically a slower sinker with lower spin rate. If you look at the way the ball spins, they're very similar. And you know how I said before that the sinker had 2 different variations? The true tilted sinker that you pronate through versus the seam shifted sinker. They're 2 variations. Well, it's actually the exact same with the changeup. You have the kind of changeup that you pronate through like that, or you throw it with a supinated release and you create that seam shifted wake effect, but with obviously lower spin rate and lower velocity. You might have even heard of this pitch called the split change. I wouldn't really call it a pitch, to be honest. It's more so a type of grip. With the changeup, there's obviously lots of different types of grips. There's even a kick change, which I think you hold like this. You spike your middle finger. I don't even know why you do that, but some guys find it more comfortable. Some guys get better results with it. Honestly, I'd say that most off-speed pitches are very similar. It's just that some of them are faster, some of them break more, some of them drop more, some of them move more arm side. That is really the core difference. Last off-speed pitch, the forkball. The forkball is a splitter. The difference is that you split your finger super wide. This is a forkball. This is a splitter. There are actually 2 consequences of splitting your finger so wide. Number 1 is that you get less velocity. And number 2 is that you get less spin rate. Famous pitchers who throw the forkball, Kodai Senga and Roki Sasaki. Due to the lower velocity and the decreased spin that a forkball has compared to a splitter, it actually moves more. It drops a lot more. The forkball has many problems. It moves more, yes, but its problems are similar to the problems that the curveball has, which is that it's easy to recognize out of the hand because it's so slow, and it can also be really, really hard to command. Imagine commanding this. This is so easy to command. Or, a cutter or a slider. These pitches are so easy to command. I mean, I don't even know how you command this stuff. I don't know how you throw this for a strike. I genuinely don't. Surely this gets stuck in between your fingers sometimes. Oh, I forgot to mention, another problem that it has is that, like a curveball, it's hard to disguise as a fastball. It's sort of a worse splitter in many cases because you're essentially trading in its ability to tunnel with a fastball with more movement. And in many cases, that's just not worth it. Because remember, the entire point of throwing an off-speed pitch is to have a pitch that tunnels easily with a fastball and moves just enough to miss the bat. So this is why, for example, if you take Roki Sasaki, he's been throwing more of his splitter this season, and I'd say he's done a lot better because of that change. Here's an honorable mention, the knuckleball. I was actually reluctant to even mention the knuckleball in this video because it is so rare nowadays, and there's a good reason for it. You might have heard of the term knuckleballer. A knuckleballer is someone who specializes in throwing knuckleballs. So why is there no sliderer? Why are there no curveballers? Why are there no changeupers or sinkerers, cutterers? Why? Well, the reason is very simple, because to throw a knuckleball, you need a very specific set of mechanics with a very specific way of releasing the ball. And even the catcher needs a bigger glove because the ball dances around so unpredictably. With a knuckleball, you throw it, I think this is the grip, depends on the person again. Throw it with as little spin as possible. You basically push the ball forward with your fingertips at release so that it has zero spin. The ball moves around unpredictably, mainly due to the way the seams on the ball interfere with airflow. The way you defeat a hitter with a knuckleball is by throwing the ball down the middle of the zone with as little spin as possible and hoping to God that aerodynamics works in your favor and the pitch takes a weird turn and the hitter gets thrown off by that. And when aerodynamics does not work in your favor, what you're basically throwing is a 78 mile per hour high school fastball to an MLB hitter. And the MLB hitter is going to destroy that. So the knuckleball is very, very cool. I like the knuckleball. I think it's a really interesting pitch. However, I totally understand why no MLB, like practically no one in MLB throws it anymore. And so few people are actually able to make a successful career off of this pitch. This is my first time trying a long form video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me what you liked or didn't like about this video, any improvements that I could make. If I went into too much detail about the science, if I could have explained anything better. So yeah, thank you for watching.